Hey everybody, Omar here, the Knife of the Party guy, and I am back with part 2 of my highlight on Andre Thorburn. One of the things I brought up earlier, and I should have maybe done this in part 1 of the video, was I wanted to show you guys how he has influenced American knife making and how he's not so different from from the American knife making as far as the way a knife is sculpted. Bringing out the Andre Thorburn L51 compact front flipper. This is a very, very popular knife here. In the United States as far as customs go. This one usually winds up in everybody's collection eventually. This is what I consider Andre Thorburn's production model, if you want to say that, because I don't know how many of these he's made. Probably hundreds. I mean, every once in a while he'll bring this knife back in a different way, but it's a model that's been very, very popular amongst knife collectors here in the States, and I'm going to show you why. If you take a look at the shape of this knife, all right, it really isn't all that far off from a Benchmade, is it? The Benchmade Anthem. Do you see the shape? Blade shapes are the same. Handles are somewhat similar. What's different? Maybe the grooves for the finger choils down here make it a little bit different versus the Benchmade Anthem, which is just a straight across. But still, this looks somewhat similar in shape as compared to if I were to take this knife here and put it up against, say, the John Arnold knife that you saw in part 1. Let me get that out of the way. That's a completely different look. They don't even look anywhere near sculpted similar, at least. This doesn't even resemble anything like this versus, say, this, which is not so far off. So subtleties in custom here, way off the charts over here. And that's pretty much what I was trying to say. In other words, John Arnold could not have come into the United States, thinking these knives are going to be a hit, in my opinion anyway, without Andre Thorburn coming onto the scene first and slowly introducing us to his style of knife making. Once he came into the picture, guys like John Arnold, guys like, this new guy here, Henny Duplessis, they were now allowed to come in through the door and introduce themselves to us. Now our eyes are wide open. We're now a little bit more open in our thinking to be able to accept these guys, and it's all because of Andre Thorburn. That's what I wanted to say, in part 1 of the video, and I just wanted to kind of make sure that I got my point across. I'm going to bring out another knife maker. This part of the video is going to be a little bit more controversial, and I don't know, maybe I shouldn't be doing this part of the video, but, it's a discussion that's been going around since I heard about it, and there's been a lot of negativity, which I don't like in the way I view South African knives, but there's going to be controversy with everything. And the knife maker that I'm going to bring out that I would like to compare to is Herucus Blomerus. Let me take this away. So Herucus Blomerus is the contemporary. I'm going to say he's a contemporary of Andre Thorburn. I mean, and this is where the controversy begins. I mean, if you look at these knives, this is an Andre Thorburn 48 front flipper, and then an Herucus Blomerus. I've heard comments on Instagram where they say that Herucus Blomerus is a ripoff of Andre Thorburn. First of all, that's very disrespectful to say that to any knife maker. The guy's just trying to make a living, so you can't. You shouldn't be doing that. He's not. He's not trying to be a copycat, and that I don't agree with. But I will say this: that yes, their styles are somewhat similar, but if you look closer, they're not really similar. They're completely different. Here we have Andre Thorburn with his much more thinner, slimmer style in knife making. He's got like finger choils. That's one of the signatures of Andre Thorburn, are these finger grooves to make it more comfortable in your hand. Versus Herucus Blomerus, who's got more of a straight edge to the shape of his knives, a little bit more angular, not so different than, say, maybe if you take a closer look at John Arnold again, the more exotic knife maker, it's kind of, I mean, look at the two handles here. This one's got sort of a jagged edge, but on the Herucus Blomerus, it's much more subdued in style. So you might be able to accept this knife more than this one, which is a lot more exotic looking, than shapely at least, aesthetically at least, than this knife here. So you kind of get like transform. That's what makes these three knives so perfect together, where this one is highly accepted, then yeah, I can accept that too. Not quite there yet, if you know what I'm talking about. So Herucus Blomerus, yeah, he's been called a copycat, and I can see in many ways. Take a look at the bolster work, but how is this a copycat? Here is bolster work that's done by hand by Andre Thorburn's wife, Marquette. I believe I pronounced her name correctly. Marquette Thorburn versus a Damascus bolster. But he's trying to, yes, I'd say, yeah, maybe he's trying to create the same effect, the same look. But it's not the same look. It's completely different. Even the blade shapes are completely different. He's got tastes in blade style that's completely different than Andre Thorburn. Andre Thorburn doesn't do a lot of different blade shapes. Versus Herucus Blomerus, who is into a lot of different blade shapes. He does Warncliffe style blades. He does drop point blades. He does all different types of blades versus Andre Thorburn, who pretty much stays with the drop point. Maybe he might modify it a little bit, but he pretty much sticks with drop point blades on just about all of his knives. As you can see, these three knives all have the same drop point blade versus a modified Warncliffe style blade, if you will, or sheep's foot, if you will. So, Herucus Blomerus is a knife maker that even creates art with the blade shapes, something that Andre Thorburn doesn't do. So, again, you're still getting a different look. Now, if we take a look at the backs of these knives, again, a little bit more different, right? We got Andre Thorburn, who doesn't do file work, but Andre Thorburn, who does a file work, versus Herucus Blomerus, who does not give that to you on his knives so much. I think I've seen it maybe on a few of his knives, but as you can take a look here, he's pretty much straight edged. But what Herucus Blomerus does do that Andre Thorburn doesn't. Andre Thorburn will usually just use G10 for a backspacer. On this knife, it's G10, okay? On this knife, again, it's just G10 for the backspacer, because your eyes are looking at the file work that he's done, so I figure just fill it in with G10. He doesn't need anything fancy. Versus Herucus Blomerus, who will do for a backspacer, because he doesn't have file work, right? He'll do carbon fiber, and in this case, he'll do M390, which is awesome. He actually used M390 as a backspacer for this knife, as opposed to using something else. And he is well known for taking knives and putting interesting things or doing interesting things with backspacers. He even uses Damascus for a backspacer, whatever he can find for a backspacer, not to necessarily compete with Andre Thorburn, but to create his own identity as a knife maker. And I think it's brilliant, because it takes a lot of work to shape a piece of M390 to fit on the back of a knife so that could be looked at as art. And it is art. I think it's a brilliant thing he's doing there. So, Andre Thorburn and Herucus Blomerus, they are sort of seen as similar styles, but they're still very, very different as far as I'm concerned. They're not the same knife maker. They do make knives in a similar way, but each knife maker is doing something different on their knives, not necessarily going over the top. If we take a look at another Herucus Blomerus piece, this one's my favorite, the L15 flipper. Again, here's where he might be kind of similar to Andre Thorburn. I'm going to bring out the other Andre Thorburn knife so we could compare. Let me take this away. So this one is the Andre Thorburn back again, so I can show you the similarity again. Now, if you look at it face on, the Herucus Blomerus knife, this knife doesn't look anything like this one. This one's much more longer, much more slimmer. This one's a little bit more compact, maybe a little bit wider, more squared shape, a little bit more with the angular angles on there, as you can see. It's not quite the same. However, here's where they look kind of similar. Now he gives you the file work. But take a look at his file work. His file work's even more intricate, isn't it? He's got a rope deal going. And of course he's got Damascus. He's using Damascus for the for the backspacer on this knife. Really stunning when you look at that. Pocket clips, yeah, they might look a little bit similar. But even then, I mean, I don't see this knife looking anything at all like this knife. In fact, I've gotten to the point now where I can look at a knife and say, oh, that's an Herucus Blomerus and that's an Andre Thorburn. I can do that now because I happen to recognize that this guy's work is completely different than this one. So, I mean, to say that he's a ripoff of Andre Thorburn, that's going a little bit too far. There are some similarities, but even in the similarities, there's only maybe one or two similarities. Other than that, they're completely different knife makers with completely different knife personalities. Another thing Herucus Blomerus does, which kind of separates him from Andre Thorburn, he has a lot more models that don't look similar. If you go on Herucus Blomerus' website, you'll see a complete diverse, offering as far as how the knives are shaped, how they look, what materials can be put on there versus what Andre Thorburn gives you. His knives, I'm not saying they look all similar, but, if you look closely, yeah. I mean, the 48 doesn't look all that far different than the 38, does it? In fact, this looks kind of like a smaller version model of this one versus what Herucus Blomerus will offer you with the L15. Let me take these away because I'm running out of room here and I don't want to confuse people. Versus what Herucus Blomerus does, where he offers you this L15, right? But then he's going to offer you this front flipper. The L6, and these knives don't look anything at all similar. Nothing. I don't see a similarity there. So all of Herucus Blomerus' models are completely different designs. They don't even look anywhere near the same. Versus what Andre Thorburn does, where here's the 48. And here's the 38. So the style and the shape is somewhat similar. And as you can see with Herucus Blomerus, let me move things up here so we can get a better look. With Herucus Blomerus, that's not the case. He's completely offering you something different. It's not like he took this knife and shrunk it down and made it this size. No, he says, you want a smaller knife? Let me give you a completely different knife overall. So you're getting a completely different taste, a different flavor every time you order a different Herucus Blomerus knife. But neither of these choices are bad. I mean, I got to be honest with you, every once in a while, yeah, I would love to see this knife shrunken down into that. So it's all thanks to the popularity of South African knife making that we're now opening our eyes. We're now allowing ourselves to get into the possibilities of what a knife can be versus, let me put this away. And put this one away too. Versus what we're used to here in the United States with, let's just say, the shape of a 00562, which is very well glorified knife here in this country. This is like the knife. When you think of a knife, it's ZT0562. This is what we love. This is the apple pie. This is the steak and potatoes knife. And this is just perfect for us. I mean, I love this knife. This is one of the few production knives that I own in my collection, simply for that fact. I I just love the shape of it. I love the look of it. I love the ergos. But I gotta admit, you know, when I want something different, Andre Thorburn fills the void. So does Herucus Blomerus, because there's only so many knives that look like this that I'm going to go get excited over. So these guys, Andre Thorburn, Herucus Blomerus, John Arnold, you know what I mean? These guys have all kind of just opened my eyes as to what I see is a knife now. And I'm so grateful for that, even though it cost me a ton of money. There's still a reason. There's still a purpose. There's still art can still be a tool. And we understand that now, thanks to the popularity of Mr. Andre Thorburn, which is the point that I wanted to get across. We've now come full circle in our knife buying, and we're so, you know, it just gives you a completely different experience, and you now look at knives differently, so they're no longer just a tool. Now they're art. This is Omar, the knife of the party. Just giving you a quick discussion on Andre Thorburn's work and why he's so important in bringing the culture of South African knife making here to the United States, and how he's even influenced a lot of the other American knife makers that are starting to put exotic materials on their knives. So that's kind of a good thing, because the knife collecting world is now evolved, thanks to different cultures and different countries and what they have to offer. And it's important to keep a hobby evolving. And guys like Andre Thorburn and Herucus Blomerus and John Arnold are making that possible. So that is it for this evening. This is Omar, the knife of the party guy. I am going to be back next week with a brand new knife. I can't wait to get that one. It was an impulse buy. I went a little insane. I'm still trying to get over it, but I don't care. I wanted to get that knife. I had to get that knife. And you're going to see it here on my channel next week. Same time, same place. So I will see you all next week. And in the meantime, happy knife hunting. Thank you so much for watching, and you guys have a wonderful, wonderful Saturday night. Thank you.